Midnight held its breath over Blackstone as a single gunshot shattered the street and blew the lantern glass to glitter. Cole Mercer said that shot was meant to start a war, while dust lifted like ghosts around his boots. Sheriff Vance Crowe stepped from the shadows, coat neat, eyes colder than the starless sky. Vance Crowe said, "Wars end when outlaws kneel." Ruby Calhoun gripped the saloon doorframe, sequins catching the moon. Ruby Calhoun said, "Both of you, stand down." Eli Hart stumbled from the livery, fists balled, courage too new for the hour. Eli Hart said, "Say the word, Cole." Asa Pike's cane tapped from the boardwalk like a judge's gavel. Asa Pike said, "Guns answer nothing clean." Cole Mercer said, "I came for truth, not blood," but his hand hovered near the worn leather of his holster. The town held still, listening for the next sin. Dawn bruised the horizon as Asa Pike poured coffee behind the livery, and the steam rose like prayer. Asa Pike said, "You walk with thunder, boy, and thunder draws fools." Cole Mercer said, "I came to clear a name that died with my brother." Eli Hart paced the straw, jaw burning with questions. Eli Hart said, "Tell me who set you up, and I will fetch their shadows." Asa Pike set the tin cup into Cole's hands. Asa Pike said, "You fetch patience first." Cole Mercer, said Crowe, "owns the judge, the wires, and half the graves." Eli Hart said, "Then we start with the half still breathing." Cole stared at the rising sun, wondering if it could burn the stink off an old sin. Asa Pike said, "If you aim for justice, aim steady, not loud." By noon, Sheriff Vance Crowe nailed a fresh notice to the post outside the bank, and townsfolk bunched like cattle. Vance Crowe said, "Any man riding with Mercer is an accessory and will hang." Cole Mercer read the ink like a sentence already carried. Ruby Calhoun slipped beside him, perfume at odds with dust. Ruby Calhoun said, "Leave tonight. This town eats the slow." Eli Hart bristled and stepped between them. Eli Hart said, "He leaves when justice stops running." Vance Crowe's deputies watched with lazy smiles, hands resting where mercy never did. Cole Mercer said, "If I run, my brother stays dead twice." Ruby's eyes softened against her will. Ruby Calhoun said, "Then bring proof before rope brings you." Evening poured amber through the saloon windows as a piano limped through a hymn it did not know. Ruby Calhoun said, "I sing for wolves so I can hear their teeth," and she slid a folded scrap to Cole. Cole Mercer said, "Crowe's ledgers?" Ruby Calhoun said, "A page torn from a book men die over." Eli Hart scanned the room while Asa Pike claimed a corner like a quiet rifle. Asa Pike said, "Paper lies less than men, but it still lies." Cole unfolded the scrap and saw a freight manifest signed by a dead man. Cole Mercer said, "Crowe runs iron through coffins." Ruby's smile cracked where secrets bled. Ruby Calhoun said, "You did not hear that from me." Night fell in one hard piece as Cole and Eli reached the freight yard beyond the river cottonwoods. Eli Hart said, "If coffins hide iron, we open one." Cole Mercer said, "And if the iron hides names, we write them loud." A coyote sang, and the warehouse door sighed like a guilty throat. Asa Pike whispered from the dark, 3 guards left, 2 right, and a prayer in the middle. Vance Crowe's voice floated from inside like a sermon. Vance Crowe said, "Count twice, load once, and make sure Mercer hears the rumor." Cole felt the old calm wrap his bones. Cole Mercer said, "We go quiet and come back loud." Eli nodded, and the night made room for wrong men trying right work. The freight yard smelled of rust and sweat when Cole Mercer pried open the coffin lid, revealing iron rifles packed in straw. "Cole Mercer," said Crowe's, "Empire runs on steel hidden as sorrow." Eli Hart's eyes widened, his knuckles white on the crowbar. Eli Hart said, "He arms his men with death and buries truth beside them." Asa Pike limped closer, lantern glow cutting deep lines in his face. Asa Pike said, "War doesn't ride alone, it drags towns with it." Ruby Calhoun stepped from the fog, a scarf hiding her hair, breath sharp with fear. Ruby Calhoun said, "If Crow learns I gave you this, he'll burn me alive." Cole's voice hardened. Cole Mercer said, "Then we keep the secret until it turns into fire of our own." Distant hoofbeats shook the dirt, and a whistle split the silence like judgment. Asa Pike said, "Time's up, boys," the wolf's sniffing. Cole closed the coffin and drew his revolver. Cole Mercer said, "Then we meet him before he howls." The hoofbeats grew into thunder as deputies surged from the tree line, rifles gleaming under moonlight. Vance Crow's voice carried like iron. Vance Crow said, "Step away from my freight or the ground takes you." Cole Mercer snapped the coffin shut, his hand steady on the revolver. Cole Mercer said, "You bury justice in wood, but I'll dig it out." Eli Hart whispered, "We can't outrun a dozen guns." Asa Pike's jaw clenched. Asa Pike said, "We don't outrun, we outthink." Ruby Calhoun's eyes darted, calculating the nearest escape in shadows. Ruby Calhoun said, "There's a drainage trench beyond the yard." Cole shook his head. Cole Mercer said, "We fight here, or he owns tomorrow." Crow's men tightened the circle, boots grinding on gravel as the lantern light bled against their rifles. Gunfire cracked like thunder splitting oak, and sparks leapt from iron crates. Eli Hart ducked, heart pounding as bullets carved the air. Eli Hart said, "We're pinned like rats." Cole Mercer fired back, eyes unblinking. Cole Mercer said, "Then bite hard." Asa Pike steadied his aim despite the limp, each shot deliberate, each breath ragged. Asa Pike said, "Count your bullets, not your prayers." Ruby Calhoun crouched behind crates, shouting over the chaos. Ruby Calhoun said, "More guards pouring from the south gate." Cole spun, revolver smoking, eyes locked on Vance's silhouette. Cole Mercer said, "Crow wants me alive. He'll kill you all first." Vance Crow barked through the storm. Vance Crow said, "Bring me Mercer breathing, and the rest for the dirt." The yard shook under violence, echoes chasing away the last trace of night's calm. The storm broke as sudden as it began, silence cracked only by groans of the wounded. Cole Mercer pressed his back to the crates, breath dragging. Eli Hart's hand trembled as he reloaded, eyes wide at the blood pooling nearby. Eli Hart said, "I shot one down, Cole. I did it." Cole put a hand on his shoulder. Cole Mercer said, "Better his blood than yours, boy." Asa Pike leaned against his cane, legs shaking, hat shadowing his grief. Asa Pike said, "Every bullet writes history, and no history forgives." Ruby Calhoun stepped forward, cheeks streaked with soot, clutching the torn ledger page to her chest. Ruby Calhoun said, "Crow's empire won't burn from one skirmish. We need proof the judge can't deny." Cole's eyes found the horizon, glowing faint with dawn. Cole Mercer said, "Then we ride for the courthouse before the sun shames us." By sunrise, the courthouse loomed like stone judgment above the square. Cole Mercer tied his horse, jaw set as bells tolled. Cole Mercer said, "Crow's law ends when truth walks in." Eli Hart swallowed hard, clutching the ledger. Eli Hart said, "If we fail, rope waits at noon." Asa Pike fixed his cane, steps slow but sure. Asa Pike said, "Truth always limps, but it reaches the gallows before lies." Ruby Calhoun brushed dust from her dress, voice hushed. Ruby Calhoun said, "If Crow sees me here, I'll hang beside you." Cole looked back at her, a flicker of warmth breaking his steel. Cole Mercer said, "Then we make sure no rope is tied today." The sun cut long shadows on the steps, and the doors creaked open like the world holding its breath. The courthouse buzzed with whispers as Cole Mercer pushed through the doors, Eli Hart clutching the ledger tight against his chest. Ruby Calhoun kept her scarf low, hiding her eyes from the deputies lining the walls. Asa Pike limped forward, voice steady despite his weariness. Asa Pike said, "We came to speak where lies wear badges." Judge Halbrook peered down from the bench, his powdered wig barely hiding the sweat beading at his brow. Vance Crowe sat smug at the defense table, silver watch glinting in the sunbeam that cut across the room. Vance Crowe said, "These men are thieves spinning yarns to save their necks." Cole Mercer's jaw tightened as he laid the ledger on the stand. Cole Mercer said, "These pages hold your truth, Judge, if your eyes still see justice." Eli's hands trembled as he opened the book, the ink-stained entries naming Crowe's deals with smugglers. Murmurs spread through the gallery, fear and hope colliding in every breath. Ruby Calhoun whispered, "If this fails, none of us leave alive." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder, silencing the uproar. Judge Halbrook said, "Order, or I'll clear this room." Crowe leaned forward, voice smooth as silk. Vance Crowe said, "Fabricated nonsense. A boy's scrawl can't undo years of law." Cole Mercer met his gaze, fire in his eyes. Cole Mercer said, "You call it nonsense because it bears your soul." Ruby Calhoun shifted uneasily, her voice hushed. Ruby Calhoun said, "He owns the deputies, Cole. This court is his stage." Eli Hart's voice broke as he raised the ledger. Eli Hart said, "I copied every name, every weapon, every date. They'll hang me if I lie, but I won't lie." Asa Pike tapped his cane on the floor, slow and deliberate. Asa Pike said, "The truth limps, but it never falls." The crowd shifted, tension thick as a storm. The judge leaned closer, his trembling hand brushing the ledger. Judge Halbrook said, "If what you claim holds, the law itself stands on trial." Crowe rose slowly, his chair scraping like steel against stone. Vance Crowe said, "This court forgets I built its walls, fed its coffers, kept order when the frontier begged for chaos." Murmurs surged again, some nodding, others scowling. Cole Mercer stepped closer, revolver heavy on his belt, but untouched. Cole Mercer said, "Order isn't shackles built by greed." Ruby Calhoun's eyes flicked to the doors, where deputies shifted nervously. Ruby Calhoun said, "He won't let truth breathe." Eli Hart's voice cracked, but didn't falter. Eli Hart said, "The names in this book are ghosts he tried to bury, but they speak now." Asa Pike's hand gripped his cane like a weapon, words sharp. Asa Pike said, "Power feeds on silence. Today we starve it." Crowe's smile faltered as the judge raised the ledger higher, his voice trembling with the weight of decision. Judge Halbrook said, "This evidence demands inquiry." The deputies broke rank, rifles raised, faces tight with orders whispered before dawn. Ruby Calhoun gasped, her hand reaching instinctively for Cole's arm. Ruby Calhoun said, "They'll silence us before truth leaves this room." Cole Mercer drew his revolver, steel flashing in the beam of light. Cole Mercer said, "Not while I breathe." Eli Hart ducked behind the bench, clutching the ledger as Asa Pike spread his arms wide. Asa Pike said, "If you shoot, every soul here knows Crowe's guilt." Crowe sneered, signaling with a subtle nod. Vance Crowe said, "Order, gentlemen, order by lead if need be." The crowd erupted, townsfolk rushing for exits as fear flooded the chamber. Judge Halbrook pounded his gavel uselessly, his voice drowned in the chaos. The chamber fell into fractured silence as Asa Pike's voice cut through. Asa Pike said, "Kill them here and you prove every page true." The deputies hesitated, barrels trembling, eyes darting to the townsfolk staring wide. Ruby Calhoun stepped forward, scarf slipping, voice steady despite her fear. Ruby Calhoun said, "Crowe hides behind you, but when he falls, you'll fall with him." Eli Hart rose slowly, ledger clutched like a holy book. Eli Hart said, "This record binds you too. Choose justice or chains." Cole Mercer's revolver stayed steady, his words flint striking steel. Cole Mercer said, "Lay down your rifles, or stand with him forever." The moment stretched taut as a whip, then one deputy lowered his weapon, then another. Crowe's jaw tightened, rage burning cold in his eyes. Vance Crowe said, "This isn't over, Mercer." Judge Halbrook's gavel slammed one final time. Judge Halbrook said, "Then let it begin." The courthouse emptied into the dusty street, the crowd carrying whispers like wildfire. Cole Mercer stepped onto the boardwalk, revolver heavy at his hip, eyes locked on the horizon. Ruby Calhoun stayed close, her voice low but sharp. Ruby Calhoun said, "Crow won't wait long before striking back." Eli Hart clutched the ledger, its weight pressing more than paper ever should. Eli Hart said, "If the judge falters, then this is just ink against iron." Asa Pike's cane thudded with each step as he muttered, "Truth's a seed. It don't sprout in one day, but it grows strong roots." Across the street, Crow's men watched with cold eyes, silent reminders of the war to come. That night, lanterns flickered inside the saloon as Colin and Asa huddled in a corner booth. The whiskey sat untouched, words heavier than drink. Asa Pike said, "Crow owns fear, but fear can be broken." Ruby Calhoun leaned in, eyes glinting with suspicion. Ruby Calhoun said, "The judge wavers. Without him, we're dead already." Eli Hart opened the ledger, candlelight dancing on its pages. Eli Hart said, "There's more here. Records of shipments, coded notes. Enough to shake the town awake if they see it." Cole's jaw set like stone. Cole Mercer said, "Then we give them eyes, no matter how blind they've been." The next morning, the town square filled as posters fluttered against walls. Handwritten notes copied from the ledger. Eli had worked through the night, ink-stained fingers trembling with exhaustion. Ruby Calhoun said, "You've just painted a target on every one of us." Cole stood guard at the edge, revolver strapped, scanning the rooftops. Cole Mercer said, "Better they see the truth in daylight than bleed in shadows." Asa Pike raised his cane and barked at the gathered crowd. Asa Pike said, "Here lies the measure of your town. Will you kneel to lies or rise with justice?" Murmurs turned to shouts, anger rising like fire, while in the distance, Crow's men began to stir. Gunfire shattered the morning calm, bullets kicking up dirt by Eli's feet. Ruby screamed as Cole yanked him behind a wagon, returning fire with steady hands. Cole Mercer shouted, "Crow wants war, then he'll have it in the open." Asa Pike dragged Ruby low, his cane abandoned in the dust. Asa Pike growled, "Stay down, girl, no bullet takes mercy." Eli clutched the ledger like his last breath. Eli Hart said, "If they burn this, it's all lost." Ruby's voice cracked, fierce through fear. Ruby Calhoun said, "Then we burn with it, but not in silence." Across the square, Crow emerged from the smoke, pistol gleaming, smile cruel. The square lay scarred by lead and smoke, bodies scattered, townsfolk hiding in silence. Cole lowered his revolver, breath ragged. Cole Mercer said, "This fight's just started." Ruby's hands shook as she gripped Eli's shoulders. Ruby Calhoun said, "He won't stop till every voice is buried." Asa Pike leaned against the wagon, blood seeping from his arm, but his eyes burned steady. Asa Pike said, "Then we don't bury, we sow. Each name in that book is a seed." Eli wiped soot from his face, nodding with grim resolve. Eli Hart said, "Then let's make them grow." The morning after the gunfight, the town breathed like a wounded animal, silent but restless. Cole Mercer stood outside the sheriff's office, jaw set. Cole Mercer said, "We can't hold ground by hiding." Ruby Calhoun leaned against the porch rail, her scarf torn. Ruby Calhoun said, "He'll come for blood, Cole, and the town's too scared to stand tall." Eli Hart clutched the ledger close to his chest, determination mixing with fear. Eli Hart said, "If we keep exposing him, maybe they'll see he's not untouchable." Asa Pike emerged slow, cane digging into the dust. Asa Pike said, "You don't break a man like Crow with truth alone. You break him where his pride won't let him bend." Inside the church, townsfolk gathered in hushed clusters. Candles flickered, faces pale with doubt. Cole spoke, voice steady but heavy. Cole Mercer said, "Crow owns your fear, but fear is only power if you bow to it." Ruby stood beside him, scanning their eyes. Ruby Calhoun said, "You've seen his lies written plain. That ledger is proof." Eli raised it high, ink still smudged from his hand. Eli Hart said, "This is every crime, Every theft, every betrayal, he cannot hide it. Asa's voice thundered from the front pew. Asa Pike said, "Justice is not given, it is taken. Will you take it?" The silence grew, then a single cheer cracked the air. That night, the saloon echoed with plotting voices. Ruby spread a map across the table. Ruby Calhoun said, "His shipments move at dawn. Cut them off, you cut his grip." Cole studied the routes with hard eyes. Cole Mercer said, "He'll be there guarding the gold himself." Eli leaned in, whispering like a prayer. Eli Hart said, "Then that's where we end it." Asa poured a shot of whiskey but left it untouched. Asa Pike said, "End it I. But know this, a man like Crow don't die quiet. He'll drag everything with him." The lamplight trembled, as if it knew blood was near. Dawn broke red as blood, the sky streaked with fire. Cole and his allies crouched in the brush near the canyon trail. Wagon wheels creaked, Crow's men guarding crates heavy with gold. Ruby whispered, breath sharp. Ruby Calhoun said, "Too many." Cole's hand steadied her shoulder. Cole Mercer said, "Enough to break him." Eli gripped the ledger, even here unwilling to let it go. Eli Hart said, "If he falls, his whole empire crumbles." Asa raised his rifle, scarred hands unshaking. Asa Pike said, "Then let's shatter him where he stands." Gunfire tore through the canyon, echoing like thunder. Cole fired first, dropping a guard. Ruby shouted, "Now!" as she charged from the rocks. Eli stumbled but pressed forward, clutching the ledger. Asa moved with grim precision, his rifle cracking with each shot. Vance Crow emerged from the lead wagon, pistol in hand, fury carved in his face. Vance Crow said, "You think you can steal from me? I am the law here." Cole met his glare, revolver aimed steady. Cole Mercer said, "Then it's time the law was broken." The canyon smoldered with the stench of gunpowder and blood, echoes of gunfire fading into silence. Cole stumbled forward, revolver still hot, his shirt torn and dust-streaked. Ruby caught her breath, eyes fixed on the rising smoke. Ruby Calhoun said, "He's not finished. Crow never stops until someone puts him in the ground." Eli, trembling but resolute, held up the blood-stained ledger. Eli Hart said, "This proves him guilty, but paper means nothing if he still draws breath." Asa steadied his cane, his rifle spent but his will unbroken. Asa Pike said, "Crow's pride won't let him run. He'll come back, and when he does, we end him." The four of them stood like survivors on sacred ground, knowing the final reckoning loomed. In town, whispers spread as Crow's riders limped back broken. Fear lingered, but hope cracked through like sunlight. Cole stood before the townsfolk, voice ragged yet firm. Cole Mercer said, "Crow's hold is slipping. Stand with us, and he falls." Ruby scanned their faces, gauging resolve. Ruby Calhoun said, "He bled you dry, stole from your tables, broke your families. This is your chance to take it back." Eli's voice wavered but carried. Eli Hart said, "The ledger shows everything. He cannot hide any more." Asa's tone cut through like iron. Asa Pike said, "If you choose silence, you choose chains. Decide now." Murmurs swelled into nods. The tide was shifting. That night, the saloon brimmed with uneasy resolve. A lantern swayed, casting jagged shadows across tired faces. Cole leaned on the bar, voice hushed. "Cole Mercer said tomorrow, he'll come. He knows he has to crush us or lose it all." Ruby's gaze was sharp, eyes narrowed with calculation. Ruby Calhoun said, "Then we choose the ground. We make him fight where his power means nothing." Eli set the ledger on the table, staring at it like a weapon. Eli Hart said, "This ends with him, or it ends with us." Asa sipped whiskey slow, voice low as gravel. Asa Pike said, "Endings don't come easy in the West. Some of us won't walk away." The silence after weighed heavier than the smoke. At dawn, the gallows loomed in the square. Crow's stage for control turned against him. Cole checked his revolver with steady hands. Cole Mercer said, "This ends today." Ruby adjusted her scarf, eyes fierce. Ruby Calhoun said, "We draw him into the open. Pride is his weakness." Eli's grip tightened on the ledger, voice shaking but clear. Eli Hart said, "If he kills us, the truth dies here. If we win, it lives forever." Asa placed a hand on Cole's shoulder, heavy with weight. Asa Pike said, "Choose justice, not vengeance. Justice lasts longer." The bell tower tolled, its iron voice announcing the beginning of the end. Vance Crowe strode into the square, flanked by gunmen, his presence heavy with arrogance. Crowe's voice cut through the morning air. Vance Crowe said, "You think a mob can unmake a king? I built this town." Cole stepped forward, revolver raised but words sharper than steel. Cole Mercer said, "You built a cage, Crowe. Today it breaks." Ruby's rifle gleamed in the light as she took aim. Ruby Calhoun said, "Your empire's made of lies." Eli lifted the ledger high for all to see. Eli Hart said, "Here is every theft, every sin, your kingdom of rot." Asa's cane tapped hard against wood. Asa Pike said, "Your reign ends now." The crowd stirred, a storm about to break. The square erupted as gunfire shattered the dawn. Cole stood firm, his revolver cracking, each shot tearing away Crowe's illusion of power. Ruby's rifle rang from the flank, striking fear into his men. Eli held his ground despite bullets whining past, the ledger raised high like a banner of truth. Asa moved slow but steady, his cane tapping as his voice thundered over the chaos. Asa Pike said, "Justice isn't the fastest draw. It's the one that stands when smoke clears." Crowe's arrogance cracked into rage, firing wildly as the townsfolk began to rise. Fear turned into defiance, and the tide began to turn. Crowe's men faltered as townsfolk threw stones, pitchforks, and defiance. Cole pressed forward, every step heavy with the weight of vengeance and justice colliding. Ruby shouted above the din, "Don't falter. He's breaking." Eli's courage burned bright, his voice carrying. Eli Hart said, "You stole our lives, Crowe, but no more." Asa fired one last shot, his weathered hands steady as ever. Crowe staggered, wounded but defiant, his eyes still burning with hate. Vance Crowe said, "This town was mine. You'll die trying to take it back." The square fell into a brutal silence as Crowe stumbled, blood soaking his coat. Cole aimed his revolver, finger trembling, torn between vengeance and justice. Ruby's voice cut through, calm but sharp. Ruby Calhoun said, "End him, Cole, or he'll rise again." Eli's voice quivered, yet firm. Eli Hart said, "Don't become him. Show us you're better." Asa's cane struck the ground, his words carved in stone. Asa Pike said, "The West needs more than blood. It needs hope." Crowe's sneer twisted, even in defeat. Vance Crowe said, "Mercy is weakness, boy." The moment hung heavy, the choice etched in eternity. Cole lowered his revolver, the decision carved deep into his soul. Cole Mercer said, "The rope will finish what my bullet doesn't." Gasps rippled through the crowd as the ledger was thrust forward. Ruby's eyes softened, seeing his choice. Eli's face lit with relief, though his hands shook. Asa nodded slow, pride hidden behind his worn face. Crowe's sneer broke into fury as townsfolk surged, dragging him toward the gallows he once used to instill fear. Justice was not swift, but it was undeniable. The square roared, no longer bound by silence or fear. The noose swung, and with it, the shadow of Crowe's reign ended. The town exhaled, the weight lifted. Cole stared at the rising sun, its warmth cutting through his scars. Ruby whispered, "It's over, but the West remembers." Eli tucked the ledger under his arm, hope flickering in his eyes. Asa leaned heavy on his cane, voice carrying finality. Asa Pike said, "Justice is never easy, but today it stood tall." Cole holstered his revolver and walked away from the gallows, the dust of the square swallowing his steps, leaving the people free, leaving the legend of the outlaw who chose justice.